Yeah, she's still getting the same thing that it has not started yet. So
okay, so what I'll do is let her join as a participant, and then I'll elevate her to I'll elevate her to panelist after she joins. Okay, is that okay?
yeah.
Okay, so just tell her that just hang tight, and then we will get her in as a we'll get her in.
And Nandaji is joining?
Nandaji should be. I'll send him the link again. Nandaji is usually on the dot, so I'm going to send him the link again. I don't know if he's also using. I just sent him again. Okay, I sent him the link again. So Nandaji should be all set. And if you want to now go ahead and start the webinar, we have 1 minute. And I have to make co-host, right? Nutanji, I'm making you a co-host.
Yes, please.
Okay, you're the co-host now. And on a clue of 3, I'm just saying it, but I don't know if it's, let me check the time. We still have a few seconds. Okay.
Actually, it's 7 o'clock right now. Yeah.
Okay, now. Okay, I'm just going live now. 3, 2, 1.
We can start recording, right?
Yeah, all done. Yeah, please go ahead.
Request to permit me to record. So please.
Yes, all done. Get started.
Okay.
We are live now. I sent
They will wait for some time,
Preeti,
right?
you need to start.
Oh, you want me to start?
No, yes.
Okay. I thought we'll wait for 5 minutes. Maybe.
No, we are live.
Okay. Namaste, everyone. My name is Preeti.
Let me check and promote you as a panelist. Okay, just a second.
Okay. Ajay, you need to put yourself on mute.
Thank you. I'm sorry about that. Namaste, everyone. My name is Preeti. On behalf of our entire team, I welcome you all to the Global Conclave, Chingari 2023. We would like to begin the program in our very traditional Hindu way, the blessed way, with a prayer.
Nadato namata na bandhu na data na putro na putri na bhartyo na bharta na jaya na vidya na vritti mamaiva gatisvam mameka bhavani na janami punyam na janami tirtam na janami muktim layam va kadachit na janami bhaktim ratam vapi matar गतिस्त्वं त्वमेका भवानि प्रजेशं रमेशं महेशं सुरेशं दिनेशं निषिद्धीश्वरं वा कदाचित् न जानामि चान्यत् सदाहं शरण्ये गतिस्त्वं त्वमेका भवानि विवादे विषादे प्रमादे प्रवासे जले चानले पर्वते शत्रुमध्ये अरण्ये शरण्ये सदा मा प्रपाहि गतिस्त्वं त्वमेका भवानि अनाथो दरिद्रो जरारोगयुक्तो महाक्षीणदीन सदा जायवक्त्र विपातु प्रविष्ट प्रणष्ट सदाहं गतिस्त्वं त्वमेका भवानि गतिस्त्वं त्वमेका भवानि गतिस्त्वं त्वमेका भवानि.
That was a beautiful rendition by these beautiful sisters. You would all agree girls are revered, cherished, and nurtured in most of the cultures across the world. This hymn has an in-depth meaning, which in essence says, I don't have anyone or anything other than you, O the Divine Mother Bhavani, and I invoke you to protect us in every difficult situation. From Pakistan to Bangladesh, from Great Britain to Sudan, from Colombia to Afghanistan, conflict affects the lives of tens of thousands of young boys and girls, whether they are white schoolgirls of UK or Yazidis or Hazaras or Coptic Christians or minority girls in Pakistan. These children are abducted, forced into sex trade, slavery, and lead a life of unimaginable misery. In 1982, United Nations General Assembly decided to commemorate June 4 of each year as the International Day of Innocent Children, Victims of Aggression. The purpose of this day is to acknowledge the pain suffered by children who are the victims of physical, mental, emotional, and sexual abuse throughout the world. Apart from the acknowledgement of the pain suffered, the marked day intends to educate the public on the issue and mobilize political will and resources to address the global problem. On the eve of this International Day of Innocent Children, Victims of Aggression, we bring to you this global Chingari conclave. The Chingari project, led by the Hindu Policy Research and Advocacy Collective, Hindu Pact, is a step towards highlighting the ongoing cultural genocide and extermination of religious minorities in Pakistan. It is a call to action for people worldwide to stand in solidarity with these communities and demand justice for the victims of these atrocities. According to reports from the US Commission on International Religious Freedom, USCIRF, and APPG, around 1,000 girls are abducted, sexually abused, and converted to Islam in Pakistan every year. These atrocities have been continuing for decades. Sadly enough, the victims of these crimes are young girls between the ages of 9 and 17. They are forcefully taken away from their families, raped or married off to much older men, and forbidden from ever returning back to their families. Let us learn a little more about what we here at Chingari Project work on through this video.
Today, we would like to share with you a human rights issue that has been largely overlooked in the media, and we believe you should know about it immediately. 96% of the population of Pakistan is Muslim. According to government figures, the remaining 4% includes Hindus, Christians, Parsis, Sikhs, and others. Pakistan's controlling theocratic government has made it impossible for religious minorities to become involved in or represented in politics as written in their constitution.
Each year, it is estimated that 1,000 young Pakistani girls of minority religions are forcibly converted to Islam. Not only are they under the age of consent, but thrown into abusive marriages with much older men. These girls should be pursuing an education or marrying the person they love. Imagine those privileges being taken away from your own sister or even your own daughter. This is the story of 3 innocent girls in Pakistan every day. Taken from their homes, forced to live a life they don't understand, coerced into a non-consensual marriage with an older stranger, and abused. How many more girls need to be kidnapped, converted, and married off before we take unified action? Our urgency for action comes from the inaction of the Pakistani government. In a majority of these kidnapping and forced conversion cases, rapists walk free and their victim is forced to remain married to them. All that is needed is a false document and the word of her husband, and a young girl is sentenced to a life of abuse. Many girls have publicly stated that they would rather die than be assaulted every day and held back from making their own choices.
तव्हां जो हे चवनि था असांजो मज़हब तब्दील कयो आहे, इहो छा आहे? तव्हां रज़ा ख़ुशी था कयो?
ना मूं पंहिंजी मजबूरी में कयो आहे।
हा, तव्हांखे मारियो पिए?
हा, मूंखे मारियो पिए, मजबूरी में कयो आहे। जे न करिया त मुंहिंजा माइट मिट कोन हुआ।
The Chingari Project is a social justice campaign aimed towards bringing awareness across the globe about the atrocities that young innocent Hindu girls face in Pakistan each day. Through informative advocacy, we seek to make our local U.S. representatives aware of the unstable religious situation in Pakistan and take further action to convey their disapproval.
Into your eyes and say everything will be okay. And where you're home, you're saving from the worst. May I secure that earth. May I secure that earth.
Thank you, Preeti, for sharing with us information about Chingari. Hello, everyone. My name is Deepti Mahajan. A very important piece of our work at Chingari is lawmaker outreach. We need your support, so please open your hearts and support us. Also, if you would like to volunteer, please put your contact in the chat. Now, I would moving ahead now, I would like to welcome our esteemed keynote speaker, Professor Vednanda Padma Bhushan. Professor Nanda is a distinguished university professor and Thompson G. Marsh Professor of Law at the University of Denver, where he directs the Vednanda Center for International Law. Professor Nanda holds many leadership positions in the global international law community, including the World Jurist Association, American Society of International Law, International Law Association, American Law Institute, and the American Bar Association's Human Rights Center and section of international law. Professor Nanda has served us as US delegate to the World Federation of the United Nations Association in Geneva and on the Governing Council of the United Nations Associations of the US. He has received numerous national and international awards, has authored and co-authored 24 books and over 225 chapters and law review articles in international and comparative law. And the American Bar Association International Law Section conferred on him the Louis B. Sohn Award for distinguished long-standing contribution to the field of public international law. Professor Nanda guides several Hindu organizations and other NGOs in the US. He is the North America Zone President of Hindu Swayamsevak Sangh and the chair of the Advisory Board of Hindu Pact and also on the Board of Trustees of Hindu University of America. Professor Nanda, we would be honored to hear from you today about your thoughts and vision on this human rights issue of systemic sexual abuse of minors.
Namaskar, everyone. Deepti ji, thank you very much for your very kind introduction. I am deeply grateful to the Hindu Pact, Ajay ji, and all the people who are working with you to have started this very important project, Chingari. And today, before I begin talking about Chingari and talking about the rights of girls, Hindu girls in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, I want to say that our heart goes out to the real disaster that happened in Odisha and all those who lost their lives. And today, we do want to say to all those people who are hurt there, that our thoughts, our prayers, our wishes are with you. Chingari project is an exceptionally important project. The reason for that is that the project began with the discussing and talking about the rights of Hindu girls who are being abducted, who are being forcibly married, and who have suffered the agony for years and years. And in both Pakistan and Bangladesh, despite having their own legislation intact, no implementation, nobody in the justice system is helping these people. They go to the courts and nobody cares. And the perpetrators bring their own views brought before the court and simply saying that what they are doing is God's wish and alhamdulillah. And then they just simply say that what they are doing simply is to bring these people to the proper way, and that is converting them to Islam. I want to say that human rights, and human rights is the one that I should simply mention, that the very first course on human rights ever in this world was at Yale Law School, and I had the privilege to be in the very first class. And then I decided that if I'm going to be teaching international law, human rights will be the first course that I would begin. And I think the second probably course anywhere in the world was here at the University of Denver, because I began teaching human rights in the late 60s. And at that time, there were no course books. There was nothing happening. But to just go back to the rights, what are the rights? These are the rights of the individuals. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the United Nations Declaration, very clearly says that each individual has got a right to decide for herself or himself about who she is going to work with, who is going to be their friends, what faith they are going to follow, and that there can be absolutely no coercion in that regard. I won't take it too long, but I do want to bring to your attention that this last January, 16th January 2023, a few months ago, at the United Nations Human Rights Council. Human Rights Council is the one that is the highest body of human rights in the United Nations, and it follows, it's a successor to the Human Rights Commission that began in 1948 at the United Nations. Eleanor Roosevelt at that time chaired that commission. And today it's the Human Rights Council that talks about human rights issues. And the point I want to make for you is that all the experts, and I should name those experts for you very briefly, who have very clearly said, urged action on coerced religious conversions, forced and child marriages, and especially about the rights of Hindu women and minority women, especially the children who have been minor women who have been taken coerced into marriages. This is a special rapporteur. Human Rights Council has rapporteurs that report on particular issues. So let me mention to you. Special rapporteur on contemporary forms of slavery, including its causes and consequences. Special rapporteur on the sale and sexual exploitation of children, and including child prostitution, child pornography, other child sexual abuse material. Special rapporteur on violence against women and girls. Special rapporteur on freedom of religion and belief. Special rapporteur on minority issues. Special rapporteur on trafficking. I need to keep reading those to you, but there are many more. There is a working group on discrimination against women and girls. And all these people, they are specially invited by Human Rights Council to work on human rights issues. And all of them have said, and I need to report to you just two small excerpts. We are deeply troubled to hear that girls as young as 13 are being kidnapped from their families, trafficked to locations from their homes, made to marry men, sometimes twice or older than, and coerced to convert to Islam, all in violation of international human rights law. We are very concerned that such marriages and conversions take place under threat of violence to these girls and women or their families. And then they said, we urge the government of Pakistan to take immediate steps to prevent, thoroughly investigate these acts objectively in line with domestic legislation and international human rights commitments. Perpetrators must be held fully accountable. That is what the experts said. And they looked at the legislation that Pakistan has. They looked especially at Sindh and what's happening there. And their reports suggested that these so-called marriages and conversions, they take place not simply that the authorities don't know, but the involvement of religious authorities and the complicity of security forces and the entire justice system. So I think all that has happened. That was in January. And 3 days ago, there is another report that came out that 9-year-old girl kidnapped, coerced, married to a 55-year-old man. And that happened after all this urging to the government And I looked at the response by the government. The government said, we are trying our very best to stop all these practices. It has not stopped. So what are the rights that these girls have? They have rights as individuals. They have also rights as a communitarian rights. And they are communal rights. And they have got rights under the international human rights law that they ought not to be forcibly married, not to be converted, not to be kidnapped. And I think I want to bring to your attention the fact that a few years ago, as many of you probably know, that the United Nations Security Council had initiated many war crimes tribunals in Yugoslavia, in other places, Cambodia, in Rwanda, and they also have a special court in Sierra Leone. This Sierra Leone court has for the first time said that these coercions and coerced marriages and these kind of abductions, that they are a crime against humanity. The United Nations has in its International Criminal Court 3 atrocity crimes: genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. So coerced marriages are seen as crime against humanity. And that is an atrocity crime for which the International Criminal Court can even bring cases, and those people who are perpetrating these crimes have to be punished. Unfortunately, in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, there has been absolutely no effort to provide any remedy to these girls who have been abducted and coerced to marry older men. What can be done? And here I want to again thank the Hindu Pact and Ajayji and all those people who are working with you, Ajayji, for taking this cause. Because in Bangladesh, I know and I just saw a note from human rights experts in that country, human rights activists in that country, that they have been trying very hard now in order to see that there is awareness among Hindus, but also to go to courts to try with the authorities in Bangladesh that these kind of things don't happen. Similarly, in Sindh, in Pakistan itself, human rights activists have been making every effort. But here in Pakistan, as in Bangladesh, the justice system is not working properly. The United Nations has made this attempt. I would request Hindu Pact to reach out to Human Rights Council to again bring to their attention the effort that the Hindu Pact has done, that the Chingari project is there, and that the United Nations must not simply urge Pakistan, but hold Pakistan accountable, hold Bangladesh accountable for violation of these rights of young girls, rights of minority people, because these minorities that also have got rights in human rights, international human rights law, and that is not being at the present time implemented in either Pakistan or Bangladesh. So I want to again thank Hindu Pact for bringing this to the attention of the international community. And I would like those who are presently listening, taking part, their friends, their families, to help this Chingari project. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Nanda, for your validation on the issue that we are working on, we are fighting for. Like you mentioned, that human rights are for everyone. I think at large, we are failing these little girls and these minorities and other communities in different parts of the world. So just to bring up what Nandaji was mentioning, and thank you again, Nandaji, for your kind words about Chingari and your support. I'm going to bring up this screen, my screen again, for just one quick minute. And I think this is the girl Professor Nanda was talking about. Before moving on, just wanted to share this case from Pakistan. This little girl, Reshma, was 9 years old when she was taken from her family. She was forcibly converted to Islam, and she was married off to this much, much older man, Tahir Hussain. The trauma this little girl and her family must have suffered is unimaginable. And yesterday I saw another girl who was abducted. She was 7 years old, and her family has not yet found her. So this is happening right now as we speak. Now with that, I'm gonna move into our next section, and let's talk about what our esteemed panelists have joined us here to share. So over the next hour, we will engage with our distinguished panelists who are joining us from different parts of the world. The areas that we will cover are grooming gangs issue of UK, kidnapping, trafficking and forced religious conversions of little girls from minority communities across different countries. Then we will dive into the systemic abuse of minority girls in Pakistan, the refugee issue, and also its repercussions. And finally, our panelists will shed light on what is the UN response to this ubiquitous issue. Our panelists have been working in their own fields for decades. They have tons of experience and they can talk for hours. But we know that we have limited time today, and then we will also open up for question and answers. So please feel free to put your question and answers in the Q&A section of our webinar, and we can bring those up for our panelists. So I'm going to introduce our first panelist, Ms. Jane Senior. And I really wanted to say that, Jane, this world is a better place because of people like you. Jane is a British youth worker and manages the Swinton Lock Activity Centre in South Yorkshire, England. Jane is a former manager of Risky Business in Rotherham, a youth project set up in 1997 by Rotherham Council to work with girls and young women at risk of sexual exploitation. Jane was the whistleblower about the Rotherham Council's apparent attempts to cover up the issue of child sexual exploitation within Rotherham by writing a series of articles in the Times. In 2016, Jane was rewarded with an MBE, the most excellent order of the British Empire, for her contributions and work. She has authored the book Broken and Betrayed, the true story of the Rotherham abuse scandal by the woman who fought to expose it. Jane, please share with us about the grooming gangs issue of UK and your experiences dealing with it.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for inviting me. I just wanted to start really just to tell you a little bit about Rotherham. So when you think about the UK, just to compare and kind of comparison, we have 8.9 million citizens that live in our capital, which is London. Rotherham is a teeny tiny town with 257,000 people that live here. So our small town, as we know, became the most infamous town in the whole world in 2014. When it was rocked by a report that a conservative estimate of a minimum of 1,400 children had been systematically raped, tortured, groomed by what was predominantly Muslim Pakistani men. So I just kind of want to go back a little bit and tell you what my role was in exposing that and kind of where we are now. So my journey began 12 years prior to that report, when I kind of was asked to manage a project that was a kind of blank piece of paper, and to work with predominantly girls. We did have a few boys, but predominantly girls. And they ranged in age from 9 to 17 years old. So during that period of 12 years, just under 2,000 children actually discussed and shared some of the most harrowing stories with myself and my staff team. They talked about having petrol poured on them, being threatened to be set fire to, locked in rooms and raped by multiple people that they couldn't identify, guns held to their heads, some of the worst stories. Now, my role of managing that project was to share that information from a child protection safeguarding point of view. So I did. I shared that with senior managers in South Yorkshire Police, in our local council, with the Home Office. I went up to our government. But basically, those that have the power and the resources to stop this, instead of stopping it, kind of ignored it. There was silence, we were ignored, and wherever we were intimidated, to shut up about this. In 2012, I made the decision to become a whistleblower to the Times newspaper. And that was following a tragic murder and death of one of our children. So the investigative journalists from the Times newspaper started to put a number of stories out. And he'd been looking at this about grooming gangs across the UK, not just about Rotherham. And he began printing stories. And the response from those that were in senior authority was not to go out and seek out those that had significantly harmed our children, but to actually come for me as the whistleblower. I was arrested, I was investigated, and a number of attempts were made to try and shut the charity down that I was managing at that time, that was still working with victims of abuse and children that were now young adults that were trying to get justice. I was informed single-handedly that I had caused significant reputational damage to my town by rocking the multicultural boat. I continue to work in this area today, including helping those children that are now young adults come forward and seek justice. The National Crime Agency has taken over this investigation in Rotherham. And up to now, over 400 years of prison time has been handed out to individuals and to gangs. And there's a number of trials that are going to come this year. We're probably about 2 years behind due to the pandemic. The sad thing is, my country has strict laws around child abuse. You hurt our children, you're going to prison. But yet it took a whistleblower to expose this for any actions to be taken. Recently, myself and a number of victims met with the Home Secretary for the UK to discuss the plans that she's put in place around this area, how she wants to tackle grooming gangs, change the law and change the legislation. Does it go far enough? No, it doesn't. But is it a start in the right direction? Absolutely. Just the fact that we're now getting round the table and speaking about this without being silenced has got to be a big step. So a new journey begins in the UK. And let's hope that this leads to successful joined up strategies, education for all children, especially boys and young men. If we don't teach boys and young men how precious and important relationships and with young women are, then actually, we've not got off the first hurdle. We need to be speaking to every faith and every background about this issue. We need new reporting mechanisms. We need access to quicker justice. We need access to therapy so people can begin on a road to recovery. And we need to protect whistleblowers. And one of the things that I always say is what happens when those who speak up for the silenced silence themselves. Children don't have a voice. We have to be their voice. We have to be the ones that are making changes to make their lives better, meaningful, more fulfilled. And for us as professionals, one thing that I say each time I go out and I speak or I deliver a training, personally for all of us, the one thing that we can change is change sometimes our language. Now, I remember when I started on this journey in 1999, my job description was about working with girls involved in child prostitution. Children aren't involved in prostitution. Prostitution sounds like it's a word and a choice that these children have made. That is why we changed it to exploitation, to abuse, to rape. So I always say, and I say to everybody, change our language, because actually that may be the first start we can to make people understand that we're talking about horrific abuse on with the worst grand scale that's imaginable. And thank you, and I'm all right for any questions.
Thank you so much, Jane, and thank you so much for what you do. Like you rightly said, right, that we need to change our language. And in one of your videos, I saw this girl mention that whenever she goes out, still, she sees her tormentors, she sees those people walking around her, despite of doing what they did to all these kids. So we need to think, what about their rights, like what these girls go through. But going back to the language that you talked about, like, haven't we, by using words like grooming is a positive word. It is supposed to be like, right, like nurturing somebody. It's not, we are trying to be politically correct here by using words like grooming. These guys are not, the people who are doing this, they're not grooming them. They are doing atrocities to these girls. So have you seen any change in attitude and the political correctness that we use around these issues in UK after Suella Braverman talked about this?
Very slightly, not enough. Still a hope that this is going to go further. There is other meetings that have been organised. There is panels that have been put together, you know, to actually speak about this. But I think it's also important to kind of understand where the word grooming came from in the UK and kind of like why that was used. And kind of grooming is basically where these adults start with these children. These adults don't meet these children, they don't abuse them, they don't rape them, torture them. They actually befriend them, they make them feel special, they buy them gifts. They make them feel like $1 million. So the grooming is part of the systematically kind of trying to brainwash a child into believing that somebody cares for them. And then the abuse will come. So that is where the grooming is, because wherever you go in the UK, be it London, be it Rotherham, be it anywhere, the same tactics around the grooming are used.
Thank you. And in your fight, can you talk about like where you found people being allies, and then where did you have to actually fight? Did you find more allies, or did you find more foes in your fight against this?
More allies, a lot of a lot of enemies, especially around our local police force. But yeah, a lot of allies, a lot of support from individuals that have gone through this, also from families, because, you know, as you said in some of your videos, this doesn't just affect the child, this affects the family, the whole family. And we don't always listen, especially in the UK, to what parents and families are telling us. And there's a lot of myths that came out of Rotherham. There was this belief that these 1,400 children all lived with families that didn't care for them or were actually in care of the local authority, but they wasn't. Some were, but the majority lived with parents that actively was doing everything they can to stop this. But like one father said to me, If you report this to the police, you report it to your local council, you report it to your local MP, and they don't help you, where do you go? Where do you get the support and the help?
I cannot imagine the helplessness of these parents. So thank you so much, Jane. And we will come back to you with more questions from our audience and from the panel as well. Just moving to on the other side of the pond, I'm going to introduce our next panelist, Terry. Terry Wiley is the former Chief Assistant District Attorney of the Alameda County District Attorney's Office. And Mr. Wiley is a strong advocate of criminal justice reform and fighting inequalities in the adult and juvenile justice systems. Mr. Wiley has vast criminal law experience and is a highly skilled trial attorney. He has been featured on several crime shows on the ID channel and Discovery Channel, featuring several of his interesting cases. He has been a dedicated public servant and has received numerous awards for his civic and professional engagements. Terry, we would like you to share your experience in the area of sex trafficking of minors. I know about minority communities, but any experience dealing with cultural issues as well, if you can cover that. Terry.
Yes, thank you, Deputy. Good morning, everyone. It's an honor to be here to share my thoughts with you on this issue. You know, human trafficking has been an area of criminal law in America that has been one that has required a lot of education of lawmakers, of law enforcement, of the community, because you know, when you look at a lot of the initial laws that impact human trafficking in the United States, many of those laws were written specifically to address human trafficking of white women. And it really did, those laws were really not intended to impact the human trafficking that was going on in minority communities. And where the majority of the trafficking today, much of it takes place in the minority communities in America. And in America, we have what are called human trafficking hubs. So for example, in California, where I'm located, the human trafficking hubs are Los Angeles, San Francisco, and across the bay from San Francisco, Oakland, where I've been a prosecutor for the last 33 years. And what I mean by they're the hubs, these are the areas that we see an explosive amount of human trafficking taking place. Now, what we also know that what human trafficking has in common, whether you're in California, whether you're in Bangladesh, or whether you're in Pakistan, is that the girls that are focused on by traffickers tend to be young, tend to be extremely vulnerable. They tend to come from very dysfunctional family backgrounds. They tend to, because of their young in age, they're not able to process, you know, exactly the situations that they are being placed in. And that's why I think what Jane said earlier, how the groomers will make them feel like $1 million and then the abuse comes later. Well, we find that the younger the person being trafficked, the more vulnerable they are to that. They're not as experienced. And so what we've had to do in the United States, in California, is we've had to take on a monumental campaign to educate people in law enforcement, people, our legislators, so that we could get changes in the law that make it much more that now the traffickers are much more at risk than the women being trafficked. Because, you know, in the past, when you looked at the laws, all of the laws penalized the women being trafficked, the women and girls being trafficked. The laws were strictly focused on them as the person committing the crime. When the reality is they were the victims of trafficking, and that it was the pimps and the traffickers that were really the ones committing the violations of the law. So you've seen dramatic changes in the law, at least in California, that really focuses on the trafficker. Now, we also do not let the buyers because, you know, this is an industry that is based on supply and demand. And it's all generated by a profit motive. Now, I know in Pakistan, it's more of a cultural issue, which is, and that's why I think that what CHINGARI is doing is so important, because it is educating us that there is also a cultural aspect to human trafficking, and that, you know, what is so tragic about what is happening in Pakistan and Bangladesh is that these young girls don't have any protections. They don't have the legal protections from the institutions of the country, and they are just, which makes them even more extremely vulnerable. And that's why I think that programs like this are very, very important, that we're educated that this is going on. Because I can tell you that, you know, many in the United States, they're not aware that this is going on in Bangladesh and Pakistan. So this is a vitally important program for raising our understanding of the issues that are going on with these young girls. And so, you know, what we have done is we do a lot of education of law enforcement, of legislators, but also of the community. So, for example, we have a law in California that requires any business has to maintain a poster in their place of business informing anyone that walks through the door that if they know of anyone that is being victimized by human trafficking, there is a 1-800 number that they can call. And probably many of you walk into stores and don't even realize that these posters are up there. But in every store, every restaurant, there has to be a poster indicating to the patrons of that business that there is a place where someone who's being victimized by human trafficking can go. And those are some of the types of things that we have thought up over the years of how to really begin to inform the public about just the monumental problem of human trafficking. You know, so much and we still today culturally fight trying to victim blame the person who's being victimized by human trafficking. You know, many times you will see someone who's found to be a victim of human trafficking, comments being made negatively about the way they dress, about the way they look. And that is really engaging in victim blaming. And there's been a big movement away from that. And a lot of the language that we use to describe the industry has changed, because so much of it was focused on making the person who's being victimized by human trafficking the focus of the problem of human trafficking. So, you know, I think that these are things that we've done in terms of having legislators change the laws that make it much harder to engage in human trafficking, but more importantly, that if you're found to be engaged in human trafficking of young girls, women, and sometimes even men, the penalties are much more severe than they have been in past years.
You rightly said that, in countries, Western countries where we live a privileged life, we don't know what is going on in on similar issues in other parts of the world. And thankfully the things are moving towards the perpetrators and not the victims, and we are focusing on that. Thankfully, that is happening. Now, if you see that what we have shared so far, what Jane shared so far, and the issue at hand, the political correctness that has led to what happened to all these girls in UK for decades, is there any we should not be called racist, and these are cultural issues? That is not how we should look at it. These are victims and perpetrators. Do you have anything in mind that that you can share? What would the law enforcement should be doing? What kind of training we need in order to have law enforcement understand that this is a different kind of issue at hand?
Deputy, that's a great question. And what has been so important in this whole area has been organizations like CHINGARI that specialize in raising awareness of human trafficking, partnering with law enforcement. We have learned so much about the whole area of human trafficking by partnering with organizations that specialize in dealing with this particular population of victims. Because anyone who has dealt in this area knows that, once these young girls and young women become victimized by human trafficking, it creates all kinds of psychological, mental, and physical issues that make them, it's very difficult to get them out of the human trafficking. It's not as easy as people think. So, sometimes we tend to think that because someone went in when they were young and they were forced into this life that they're just waiting for someone to pull them out. That's not necessarily the case. You can find someone who's been victimized, but because they have gone through so much emotional and psychological trauma, that it is very difficult to pull them out of that life. And so to answer your question, I think it's very important that organizations like yourself, like the CHINGARI organization, partner with law enforcement to hold educational trainings for them and to inform them what is going on in Pakistan and Bangladesh that they should be aware of. How can this impact immigration consequences? One of the things that's changed in the law is you were having young women brought to the United States, and then their traffickers using their immigration status to threaten them with deportation if they didn't follow along with the traffickers. Well, so the laws of immigration have changed so that it makes it much more difficult for employers, for traffickers to threaten someone who has immigrated to the United States with deportation in order to get them to do what they want to do, which is normally allow them to keep abusing them. So I think that those are some of the very key things that you can do, and why organizations like CHINGARI are so important.
Thank you so much, Terry. And I think we have a long road ahead in dealing with this, because it's not just a legal issue, it's an immigrant issue, it's a cultural issue, and of course,
Yes.
A social issue. Thank you so much. Moving to our next guest speaker, our speaker joining us from Australia, I would like to invite Sarah Gates. And I would say Sarah is a real trooper as she's connecting with us past midnight Australia time. Thank you so much, Sarah. Sarah is a human rights advocate and is currently pursuing her PhD in Dharma. Her favorite research areas include eco-philosophy, eco-critical theory, yoga, tantra, Kashmir Shaivism, decolonial ecofeminism, post-colonial studies, Hinduphobia, decolonization, and sustainability theory. Sarah, please share your thoughts and your experiences in that side of the world.
Namaskar, thank you. That was a long introduction. I'd forgotten I'd put all those things on my biography. So yes, I'm interested in ecofeminism and particularly where it critiques ideologies that have, I guess, forced humanity into a very exploitative approach toward both nature and toward Indigenous and colonized peoples. So there's a bit of a relationship there between, I think, the feminism that needs to come out from, I think, the global South. It needs to come out from the women who are the survivors of these types of very serious, I think, crimes against humanity. I think we need to be hearing more of those voices, but of course we have cultural and language barriers and we have systemic barriers, so we often don't hear about it. As the other two speakers have mentioned, the important work of human rights defenders like CHINGARI in bringing to the public consciousness cases where very underprivileged, very ostracized and marginalized peoples would not normally have their voices heard. And so we probably wouldn't know about this were it not for organizations like CHINGARI raising that public awareness. There's plenty of research on Pakistan and its human rights violations against women and girls. And I think the takeaway is that this is occurring in a very institutionalized context, a little bit like the Rotherham issue and like trafficking, where you have multiple sectors of society working systemically to enable the abuse to continue and the exploitation to continue. So in that complex institutional framework, you have a number of different actors that enable these violations to continue. And I think in Pakistan, there's been a lot of talk around the religious aspects of the attitudes, I think, toward women and girls. And I think there's a lot to be critiqued of the oppression and the sense of ownership and the status of women and girls in Pakistan in general. I'm going to just read a quote from a World Health Bulletin from the 6th of June 22. It says, gender-based violence against women in Pakistan is rooted in the patriarchal interpretations of religion in Pakistan. Religious principles on pre-existing behavioural codes of Pakistan contribute to the alarmingly high rates of gender-based violence. And there are statistics that indicate that 70 to 90% of women in Pakistan experience interpersonal violence. So we're talking about a national problem, and it impacts on all women and girls, but particularly those who are least privileged, and they would be the minorities, which are at 4% as per a previous presentation. So if you have a look a little bit into the history of Pakistan, you'll see that small cohorts of Hindus are located in particular regions. So you'll have the majority of, say, the Hindu population could be living in Sindh. And of those who left at partition, the more privileged classes tended to be able to leave, and they left behind something like 90% of the Hindu community who were less able to leave, less privileged. And so you have this residual, I think, intergenerational burden that's operating against the minorities, Christians and Hindu and Sikh and Parsi minorities, but against them in terms of their ethnicity, their religion, and their caste. And they are, I guess, relegated to the lowest echelons of society. So they can't access meaningful work, so they cannot empower themselves. They tend to be illiterate or uneducated. They don't have access to education, and attitudes toward the education of women are roundly critiqued across Pakistan in general. And so the resources, and also obviously with no upward mobility, access to things like healthcare and the compound issues that come with being basically treated like second-class citizens, or with a huge degree of dehumanization. These compound issues create, I think, intergenerational burdens and intergenerational traumas, which are very difficult to overcome without a systemic response. And human rights defenders have been calling for a systemic response. There's been attempts to make laws that do, I guess, legally comply with human rights, international human rights standards, but there's been a strong pushback from religious political groups, fundamentalist Islamic religious political groups that have pressured the government not to ratify and not to enforce. So any type of law that has been, I guess, suggested has been shut down, and any laws that are put in place are not complied with. And I think this goes back to, and I keep reiterating, the institutional nature of this violence and the enablement of the entire system, and the total lack of self-determination that is available to these very isolated women and girls. There are a few things that have been, I think, recommended, and obviously those recommendations are cultural, which means changing the culture of Pakistan. It means inclusive access to education, inclusive access to meaningful employment so that they can lift their families up out of poverty. It means access to health services, and it also, as in the case of trafficking, there need to be, I think there's things that we can do from outside Pakistan to ensure that I think when we do business with people, when there's migration and other types of transactional relationship between our countries and Pakistan, there's ways to ensure that anybody who's implicated in these very serious atrocities against young girls and women, they are deprived of access to the benefits of these transactions. So things like, I think visa, that's a really good idea that I heard before, you know, just keeping that supply, that chain of accountability, and putting these crimes underneath that same network of the structure of the system that prevents trafficking in general. So anywhere that trafficking protections are put in place to monitor these types of crimes and to ensure that our citizens are not doing business with these people, all of those, I think, chains, networks of accountability can include this as part of the modern slavery paradigm. So that would protect, it gives an incentive to people not to practice these abhorrent, whether cultural or religious practices. And then there's, well, we've talked about educating girls and boys into healthy relationships, but that's going to be very difficult in terms of access, especially if the children are not going to school. So there need to be more, I think, first responders so that there's people out on the ground that are able to take these reports, and people, mandatory reporting type of laws that can be put in place. So if you're seen to be protecting people who are participating in these violations of human rights, that then there are repercussions for those enablers as well. So mandatory reporting in schools, in the police force, in the health system. These are all little checks and balances that can be put in place. But there is a problem in Pakistan, and that is that only 1.5% of the police force are women. So aside from the fact that it's a patriarchal system that basically ignores any attempts to ratify human rights, there's nowhere to go. And even if there are cases put before the courts, only 4% of sexual violence cases are being prosecuted. So it's a bit of a catch-22, because when you go forward, you face that burden of ostracization because of these cultural values as well. So if there's no support, then people are less likely to be reporting. So I think there's a whole range of different issues that that do need to be dealt with. But I think that the point that I wanted to make is that communication about this is absolutely vital. It needs to be shared across as many platforms as possible in the languages that those platforms audiences are actually able to understand. And some of those, the terminology that I see coming out of South Asia on these crimes is hardly consistent with the nature and the seriousness of the crimes. We heard about grooming before, and that word is used at a professional level, and it seems like it's a little soft, but what it's really referring to is coercive control. I think this is a more popular term now, the use of coercive control, psychological abuse, that's brainwashing, and manipulation, instrumentalization. I think these are all kind of fancy words, but grooming captures all of those elements. When it comes to abductions, that's depriving a person of their liberty. It is a very serious human rights violation, and to then deprive them again of their beliefs, their faith, their religion, deprive them of their agency. It's almost like being held in complete captivity. And certainly has to fall, I think, under the modern slavery type of paradigm to become something that's taken more seriously worldwide. Yeah. So it is a kind of trafficking. It may not happen in an organised manner in the way that other types of trafficking happens, like international trafficking, but it is a type of ordinary, everyday, sort of low-grade trafficking. And fundamentally, I think we've got to talk about the erasure of not only the personhood, but the erasure of their collective personhood. That's the erasure of their culture, their traditions, their history, their ancestry, and total destruction of these people as a people. It's a kind of genocide. It's a destruction of a people, because if you want to control a people, the best way to do it is to control their reproduction.
Yeah.
So the control of women's and girls' reproduction and their assimilation into the dominant culture is a type of destruction of them as a people. So whether it's cultural genocide, a type of slow ethnic cleansing, or a type of broader genocide, they're things that we need to continue to discuss.
Yeah.
And so these are my thoughts, and I hope that people start using the terminology that really defines these acts as crimes against humanity.
Thank you, Sarah. That's exactly what we aim at, not just from an educational or awareness perspective, but to understand there is a different kind of subjugation here. And I would say it's going in a more institutionalized way across the globe, because the idea is to subjugate minorities, and using minor girls is the best way to go about it. So now,
Deepti ji, my apologies. I have to leave for another program. So namaskar, everyone. But I simply want to mention to you that in the chat, there is one question raised about the United Nations not doing very much about the human rights, and that human rights oppressors are sitting on the council. And that's absolutely right. But there is no choice but still to go to that world body, because that is one organization where at least around the world there can be some understanding, appreciation, awareness of these issues. So I think we need, as Chingari, to still go to the United Nations, implore, convince that they need to take action against Pakistan. And I think the second thing that we ought to do is focus on crime against humanity. That this coercion and this forced marriage, as the War Crimes Tribunal itself said, it's a crime against humanity. So crime against humanity and going to the UN, that still are important. So my apologies to have to leave.
Thank you so much, Nandaji. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So we will move to our next panelist, and I would like to invite Dr. Omendra Ratnu. Dr. Omendra Ratnu is from Jaipur, India, and he is an ENT surgeon who runs his own hospital. He runs an NGO by the title of Nimit Ekam that helps displaced Hindu refugees from Pakistan. Now, issues of Hindu survival and conflict with violent faiths are his core concerns, for which he travels around the world to raise awareness and funds. He recently floated Dharmaj Foundation of India as a central corpus funds for organizations working on the ground. Omendraji has penned a book on the great Maharanas of Mewar who fought Islamic invaders for 1,000 years continuously. He is not only a powerful orator, but also a singer, composer, writer, Gita communicator, and a ground activist for Hindu causes. Omendraji, what has been your journey with this cause and helping the refugees that are coming and running away from Pakistan? And please share with us, what have you learned in the process?
Namaste. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk about an issue which is so close to my heart. Although I'm not known to be politically correct, and I don't mince words when it comes to pointing out the culprits. So, what is grooming? The English we learned in St. Xavier's was grooming used to be a good word. We used to groom our children to be good citizens, to be decent human beings. So when we give into this lingo of the left that rape is to be reclassified as grooming, I think we have lost half the war. So I refuse to call it grooming gangs. I call them raping gangs. These are Pakistani Muslims who had their religious indoctrination, who are taught in their madrasas and their religious places that this is to be done to non-Muslims. And this is all written. This is not something that I'm creating from my own head. It's all written in their texts. And this needs to be called out. The bluff needs to be called out. And that is the only way to tackle it. When we keep speaking lies to each other, then we're not only doing injustice to these tiny little beautiful girls, but we are also allowing evil to escape. And that only means that we are laying ground for further rapes to happen. As far as the Pakistani Hindu issue is concerned, I started on it on a very compassionate note. I am a doctor, so I met a Pakistani Hindu physician who told me that the Hindu population in Pakistan is suffering. This is their number. That is these are the issues they face. And because in Bharat, in India, we have a context to the Hindu-Muslim conflict. We have been fighting each other for the last 1400 years. So to me, it was not a surprise that Hindus are facing this in Pakistan, although the Hindu leadership And the political leadership of India tries to, sugarcoat this whole Hindu-Muslim conflict as no, all is hunky-dory, no, there's few people who are terrorists. The fact is that we are two different people and we are not very comfortable with each other. The best chance for us to come out of each other's shadow was to complete the partition in 47, but that didn't happen. Mr. Gandhi and Mr. Nehru botched it up. They destroyed the entire fabric of this nation, and at least Hindus, they didn't get anything out of this partition except a very raw deal, in the sense that a lot of land was given disproportionate to the population of Muslims, and still a significant percentage of them remained behind. So the surgery was done, but the cancer was still left in the body. So kudos to the surgeon and bad luck to the patient being our mother nation in this case. This issue has been a crazy up and down journey for me ever since I started working for Hindus of Pakistan in 2012. It's about 10 years ago. I started it as, giving some money to these Hindus who would come out of Pakistan because they were very poor people. And then the BJP took this up in their election manifesto. Narendra Modi ji said that these Hindus are natural citizens of this country. They have a right over Bharatvarsha. Bharat is their motherland. And this meant two things for me, that there is a civilizational change in the understanding of the whole Hindu-Muslim issue, and especially vis-a-vis Pakistani Hindus. 10 million of them being left behind after the genocide of last 70 years, after the mass-scale rapes, conversions, and pillaging of their property, destruction of their physical, mental, psychological, spiritual, religious spaces. Yet 10 million Hindus still live in Pakistan. So I thought this was a civilizational thing Shri Modi ji had started, and legally it ensured safety of people like us, middle class Hindus, that we could actually deal with Hindus of Pakistan having a Pakistani passport, which before this would mean dealing with Pakistani citizens, and we would be under the security radar of the Indian security establishment. And 2016, Nimitt Ekam was formed. Nimitt Ekam literally means a Sanskrit word. It means that we are only the instruments of the divine. The divine is the one doing the work. We are not doing the work. We're just the instruments. And gradually we started demanding money, asking for money and donations from the Hindu Samaj. And it gives me immense satisfaction and pleasure that the Samaj didn't disappoint us. Samaj blessed us, and Samaj who stood with us. They gave us various platforms. And in the past 8 years or so, we have taken out 12,000 Hindus out of Pakistan. 4,000 citizenships we have managed in Rajasthan. Why did I say that it has been an up and down journey? Because, as I said, I started with a lot of reluctance because I could be arrested anytime by the security establishment of this country for working with Pakistani citizens. Then comes Shri Narendra Modi, who puts it in the election manifesto. It makes people like me very safe and very comfortable to work. And then Rajnath Singh ji, the Home Minister, he'll use the expression in Hindi कि भगवान उनको लंबी उम्र दे, and हम हिंदुओं को उनका चरणामृत पीना चाहिए. उन्होंने the kind of work that Rajnath Singh as Home Minister did, he gave us all the reliefs, long-term visa extensions. They could have bank accounts. The Pakistani Hindu migrants could have a driving license. They were even given Aadhaar cards on the basis of their Pakistani passports. So Rajnath Singh ji's era was the golden era, if you ask me, and it is in those years from 2014 to 2019 that we extricated the maximum benefit. The second stint of the Modi government, we were very overjoyed, like we were really overjoyed to have the Citizenship Amendment Act. But Citizenship Amendment Act was resisted by the jihadi forces, and this government capitulated. So then it is a nosedive, it came, and for 3 years during the time of COVID, not a single Pakistani Hindu could be rescued out of Pakistan since the borders were closed. Now, since January 2023, we have been, again, the trickle has begun. And about last month, the state government in Rajasthan has cracked down upon the houses of these poor, helpless people in Jodhpur and Jaisalmer, where there are maximum numbers of these Hindus. They have broken 140 homes altogether. We tried to fight it, but we were late. By the time we reached there, already the houses had been demolished. The good thing in this whole thing is that the Samaj has risen, the Hindu society has risen. They have blessed us with funds. They have rallied around us. And that has given us hope and determination that we are rebuilding the homes of these Hindus in Jaisalmer and Jodhpur. So,
do you, in your experience with these refugees and everybody that has come so far and people that you have talked to, have you, like, what about the issue that, you know, that they are running away because their kids are in danger, their daughters are in danger, their female are in danger, you know, that is the basic, because that's what everybody is scared of as a brother, as a father, right? So is there,
yes.
can you share any specific examples or things that you have faced with these girls in Pakistan?
Yeah, I met a guy, I will not name him because I have to save the man's dignity. Let's name him Kailash, Kailash Baloch. This is a man who lives with this curse in the heart that his daughter is right now breeding jihadis in Balochistan. When his daughter was picked up, he went up begging these jihadi murderers to free the child in lieu of money. The child shouted from inside while she was being raped that, "Papa, you go to Bharat, take my brothers, he has 3 other sons, never come back. I'm finished, my life is over, but save yourself." Imagine the burden of a father who lives on the same globe as his daughter and was not able to save that girl child. This has been proved by n number of reports, the European Union Parliament, the Amnesty International, even the Pakistani Human Rights Commission, the Pakistani journalists themselves concede that the number of girls that are picked up every year is close to 1,000. That means 3 girls, Hindu, Christian, Sikh girls, are picked up every single day from their homes. Most of them are below 18. There's this famous case of Reena and Ravina, who were 13 and 16 respectively. This Judge Athar Minnullah of Allahabad, of Islamabad High Court, constituted a medical commission. That medical commission, these doctors, they lied, they gave a false report because the parents were with the Nadra card, which is like the Aadhaar card of Pakistan. They had the age and all that. And now I know, very sadly, very tragically, that one of these girls has ended up in a brothel in Lahore. So this is an everyday story, 3 girls per day. And we Hindus belong to a lineage where Shri Krishna destroyed entire mankind for dishonoring one lady. One Draupadi was dishonored, and Shri Krishna vowed that I'm going to finish this mankind. We live in a mankind which is quite comfortable and which is easygoing, and the kind of words that we condemn, we urge Pakistan to do this. I honestly don't understand the meaning of such an important language. If there is a person who's violating the law, either that man is put behind bars or that man is moved away from the society. He's to be banished. So Pakistan as a nation is a rogue nation. They are doing terrorist activities. They are harboring criminals and terrorists, and they are doing this to their own girl children, so-called old. They don't consider Hindus as their own. But unfortunately, these Hindus are victims of their time, and all this is a stated goal of these people, that the Hindu girls will all be converted to Islam. teenage girls, 11 years old, 10 years old, 9-year-old children who should be playing in kindergarten, who should be playing around with their dolls, who should be preparing themselves for a happy and a joyous life, are being crushed like this in broad daylight. The Hindu community all over the globe is sleeping hunky-dory. The global community is not to be held responsible because the Hindu community itself is not sensitive to this whole thing. Now things have started changing after this Jodhpur and Jaisalmer demolitions, and we are seeing a change. Let's see what future unfolds for us.
Thank you so much, Umendraji, for validating, because I know that you and your organization has been working directly with these refugees for last more than a decade, almost 15 years now, and validating that the law is not on the side of these families, these minority families of Christian, Sikh, Hindu girls in Pakistan. Yes.
As far as the law is concerned, Deepti, let me quote an example. Wrinkle Kumari, the girl who was kidnapped in 2013, and this the Chief Justice of Pakistan High Court, Iftikhar Chaudhry, publicly says this. When the girl says that I want to go with my parents, she said, no, you have become a Muslim. There is no way you can go back to your parents. In Islam, there is only one way, that is the coming way. Islam mein ek hi rasta hai, tum aa sakti ho, tum ja nahi sakti ho. This is the Chief Justice of Pakistan Supreme Court. So much so for justice. The only option Hindu Samaj has to take out every single Hindu out of that hellhole.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, Umendraji. Moving into our next and final section of the panel, I'm going to invite Rahul Surji. And Rahul Surji is a former IPS officer from India. He took premature retirement at the rank of Inspector General of Police. He's a former UN official with a 40-year track record of effective services at the national and international level. In the UN, Mr. Soor served in the Office of Internal Oversight Services and in different critical positions like the Chief of Peacekeeping Evaluations, the Chief of Conduct and Discipline in the Office of the Special Representative of Secretary General. In the UN's peacekeeping mission in Haiti, he participated. He is an expert at various facets of the UN's functioning and is widely traveled in Africa, Middle East, Latin America, and Europe. He retired from the UN in 2021. Rahulji, we would like you to share your side of your experience. You have traveled in so many different countries, and we would really like to know your thoughts about this issue in victimization of minor girls.
Namaskar to everybody. Thank you very much. It's a real honor to be invited out here and to listen to so many participants and their views. I'd just like to give 4 perspectives on this, and I'd like to also add specific recommendations in this, because I think it's very important that we move from awareness of the situation to the action. So here is what I'd like to say. The first is, in terms of Pakistan, Dr. Ratnu had referred to it. According to eminent Sweden Pakistani professor Ishtiaq Ahmed, Pakistan was born in hatred for Hindus in 1947. This, unfortunately, seems to be coming true in their country, because Hindus have, in terms of the numbers, have gone down from 20.5% in 1947 to 1.6% in 1998 when they took the last census. Apparently, the numbers have decreased even further. Now, the Hindus of Pakistan not only lack power, money, influence, the most embattled amongst them are the Hindu women, who've had to suffer decades of forced conversions, abductions, and marriages. The drastic decrease in the population of Hindus and the targeting of Hindu women in Pakistan needs to be seen legally as a form of slow ethnic cleansing. I think international law needs to catch up on this, but we can discuss this point later. Second, many reports from many organizations, including the United Nations, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and even the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan, to their credit, have catalogued the human rights violations against Pakistani Hindu girls and women. The specifics of the problem are clear. I will not repeat them. But here, Professor Nanda had referred to the United Nations, and I want to go a little bit deeper into that because I think that represents the greatest opportunity for Chingari and other organizations to take this forward in a concrete manner, which I would really hope happens. And here it is. The UN has a process called the Universal Periodic Review. Every 4 to 5 years, the human rights record of all UN member states is peer-reviewed by the 47 UN member states of the Human Rights Council. This year, the UPR of Pakistan was done on 30th January, and it did not go well. There were calls to Pakistan to end forced conversions, child marriage, and prevent trafficking of women and girls for sexual purposes. Mexico specifically asked for adopting all necessary measures to eradicate the forced conversion of women to Islam and girls belonging to minority communities. I have a list of all the 40 countries or so who have slammed and criticized Pakistan in this respect, and that forms a very important avenue of a future action for us. Second, in terms of what happened, 122 delegations took to the floor, 11 states submitted their questions in advance, and Pakistan received 340 recommendations, which was a substantial increase from the previous UPR in 2017, when they had received 289 recommendations. The International Commission of Jurists said that the fourth UPR of Pakistan had drawn global attention to a number of serious human rights violations in the country. Again, I have some action ideas, which I'll tell you about. Third, it has been accurately noted that humans are pattern-seeking, storytelling, and analyzing beings. Is there any common thread in the rape, conversion, and forcible marriage of Hindu girls in Pakistan, the unimaginable horrors of what ISIS did to Yazidi women, what Boko Haram did to Nigerian girls, what the grooming gangs did to English girls in the UK, what was done to German women on 2015 and New Year's Eve, and what is being done to the Coptic Christian women and girls in Egypt who are overpowered, kidnapped, and lured and converted, described in a book called Jihad of the Womb and the continuing cases of love jihad in India? The answer is obvious. I would urge everyone to read the restricted UN report on the genocide inflicted by ISIS upon Yazidis and the women, which says, and I quote, "The ISIS did this because of their radical interpretation of Islam," unquote. This is the United Nations. And in 2015, the New York Times carried an article entitled ISIS Theology of Rape, which says, quote, "In the moments before he raped the 12-year-old girl, the Islamic State fighter took time to explain that what he was about to do was not a sin. Because the preteen girl practiced a religion other than Islam, the Quran not only gave him the right to rape her, but condoned and encouraged it." End of quote. The fourth point which I'd like to make relates to the psychology of contagion. It is not only we governments, corrupt or indifferent courts and police that enable such atrocities, but the public in a country can be complicit in tolerating such acts. For instance, in the famous Wrinkle case in Pakistan, the man who was responsible for converting her got her out of the court, and he was greeted by thousands of his cheering supporters who were firing their rifles into the air. What does it mean? That shows that people really supported him. What about the grooming gangs in the UK? What did the community do? Really nothing. So consequently, we are left with no alternative but to come to the conclusion that this is an ideology that views non-believing women as objects to be conquered, enslaved, and destroyed. The UN report says that ISIS fighters were, quote, "so ideologically enslaved that they believe that by committing some of the most horrific crimes imaginable, they are bettering the society in which they live." In all the cases above around the world, those who commit these crimes believe that they are improving society as they have the sanction and authority of the religion. And if silence is any measure of consent, then the muted response of the community to which they belong in the face of such atrocities makes the problem immeasurably bigger and tougher than has been generally acknowledged. But at the same time, I would also like to propose some specific solutions, and here they are. One, that is CHINGARI is obviously working on Hindu girls, but I think it needs to reach across the world. All other organizations who are working in this issue of religiously inspired sexual slavery and exploitation need to join hands together because strength lies in numbers. That's number one. Number two, all these organizations together, I suggest, should write to all the countries who were critical of Pakistan in the fourth UPR, pointing out the worldwide pattern. And I would be happy to give advice to CHINGARI and other organizations on what these 40 countries are and write to them. Another letter needs to be written to the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, pointing out that he appoint a special rapporteur to study and report on the worldwide pattern of forcible conversions, rapes, and sexual slavery said to be committed in the name of that specific religion. I say this because there is a special rapporteur for religion and freedom of belief already. The same letter needs to be sent to the US Congress, European Commission, and other national bodies, given at all levels where awareness needs to be raised. There also needs to be a fresh look at the issue of conversions and ethnic cleansing, which is not defined right now as a crime, but it also needs legal examination at the highest level. So my biggest takeaway in this is that there is a pattern, that it is happening around the world, that we need to reach out and form a chain, that we need to think that we are not alone, that we need to exchange stories, and then we've got to write a sharp, straight letter to the United Nations with all the technical help which I can give to make life really difficult for them. They are supposed to legally respond. So that's what it is. And I congratulate CHINGARI. It's really wonderful listening to warriors all over the world. And people, and Dr. Wayne Ratno, who is a fighter to the core, and all the people who are engaging in this extremely important issue. Again, my plea is join hands, get your forces together, and move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rahulji. And I think just listening to you, I feel like there are a few words that we need to internalize, like ethnic cleansing, human trafficking, crimes against humanity, violation of the rights of indigenous people, especially children and women of minorities across the world, as well as other religions. We need to make this an international movement. It requires a lot of courage, a lot of dedication, and it's just overwhelming what everybody has shared so far. So my heartfelt gratitude to all our esteemed panelists. It was a thought-provoking discussion and session, and it is an emotionally overwhelming experience, but an extremely important problem that we want our audience to know more about. There is so much to ponder. There's so much to act upon. We should all do our dharma and be the help of these people in need. So with that, I'm gonna check. Do we have Teresa as in our panel?
Yes, we do.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and give 2 quick minutes to Teresa. Teresa is joining us from Fremont. She is Fremont's vice mayor and first African-American ever elected in 64 years to Fremont City Council. Teresa is also the first African-American woman with a degree in nuclear engineering and has served as former White House staffer. Teresa continues to advocate for women issues from healthcare, business opportunities, empowerment, and equality pay, as well as diversity, equity, and inclusion. Teresa, you've heard all our panelists so far. We would like you to quickly, validate what your thoughts are, and also support us and show solidarity. So, Teresa, go ahead, please.
Thank you so much. It's been wonderful listening to all the esteemed speakers today, and I thank you for all of your heroic efforts to ensure that our girls and boys are, especially those of minorities, that they live in safe and healthy environments. Thank you to CHINGARI for making this happen globally. But human trafficking is forever an increasing area of international concern. And it's one that is the fastest growing in criminal activities in the world, and is to be the second largest criminal industry globally, which means we must reaffirm our commitment to protect and empower survivors of all forms of human trafficking, to prosecute the traffickers, and to bring an end to this human trafficking worldwide. I think that in summary, this is an immoral crime, and it's something that is happening to millions of people around the world globally. I appreciate all the comments and in full agreement. One of the other measures that we need to take a look at is especially those that when we start, it starts in the family, it starts in the schools, it starts in the local neighborhoods, that what can we do at the very most simple level of being observant and making sure we report all of these type of activities to our law enforcement, to our legislators, hold our elected officials accountable for this, and finding out what are their visions for human trafficking and human rights to protect our communities. It starts right there, and we bond hands together. So thank you. In summary, I'm going to conclude with a poem by Louis Rams to summarize human trafficking, and it is from a viewpoint of a survivor. Human trafficking sells your body, sells your soul. They keep you under their control. To them, you are just a piece of meat for humanity to sit and eat. The younger the victim, the easier to control. By the time they're teens, their spirit is cold. No longer do you have the will to fight. It becomes their way of life. They never had a childhood or a family to love, or to even know what love's about. For their hearts and minds have been turned inside out. Fear is the only thing they know, and in the face, it will show. Many are bought and put on the streets. If they don't meet their quota, they don't eat. When there are those who are sold privately, these are things that you never see. Most are girls, but there are boys, and they're all used as sexual toys. We have to let all countries know human trafficking has got to go. Thank you so much, Chandra, for having me today. God bless you all and our partnership worldwide. May we continue to keep the awareness of human trafficking alive and keep fighting for the voices that are not being heard. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Teresa. Thanks a lot for all your words and support. And with that, I am going to pass it over to Rakhi Srani. And Rakhi is going to talk about some of our really important action items and call for action. So let me pass it on to Rakhi.
Thank you, Deepti. So I just wanted to reiterate a couple of things. Just what Nandaji said. What is happening in Pakistan is a clear crime against humanity. It's a crime against humanity, no matter where it happens in the world. And the world needs to start taking notice. The most unfortunate part about what is happening in Pakistan is really how systemic that abuse is. And just to reinforce how severe this problem is, I'll just mention two things. That, as Ms. Jane mentioned, in the UK, there is a pattern by which these girls are befriended and groomed. In India, as we saw in the movie, the Kerala story, there's a pattern by which they try to entice these girls, make them feel special before they throw them into lives of hell. But in Pakistan, there is no grooming of them. There is no, befriending of them. People like men like me and Mitu, they have the complete support of the police, the courts, the government. In their minds, compared to democratic countries like the UK or India or the US, minority girls are their right. They are their property. Their families, these girls, their families have absolutely no recourse. The system provides them no relief whatsoever. And as Terry mentioned and Ms. Cox mentioned, in areas like California and across the US, there is an effort to educate law enforcement about the signs of human trafficking or the attempts to change the laws. On the other hand, in Pakistan, it's quite the opposite. I'll just give you one quick example before I go into what's being done, is that in October 2021, the Pakistan's Ministry of Human Rights prepared a bill called the Anti-Forced Conversion Bill 2021. The objective was simply to protect underage girls from being kidnapped or forced to marry and convert to Islam. And the law in past would have forbidden the conversion of a non-Muslim to any other religion, including Islam, until the expressed age of 18. And the consequences were 5 to 10 years in prison and huge fines. It was rejected by a parliamentary panel, even before it got to the parliament, for being un-Islamic and against the Constitution of Pakistan. In fact, the Pakistan's Minister of Religious Affairs warned that a law on forced conversions would deteriorate peace in the country and create further problems for the minorities. The minorities, in other words, he said the minorities would become more vulnerable if you tried to protect them. This is the condition in Pakistan compared to every other democratic or any other democratic country in the world. And that's why this is something that we really need to pay attention to. CHINGARI, as a project, and each of us individually, is really committed to bringing awareness to this horrific condition in which these little girls and their families live, the horrible hell in which they find themselves in. As Aditi mentioned, 1,000 girls a year. This is 3 girls on average that this is happening to. We're committed to bringing this to the world's attention in 3 ways. Over the past 3 years, we have met with 12 lawmakers, US federal lawmakers, to let them know about what's happening in Pakistan. The US government is, in a way, enabling what is happening there. They have given over $6 billion of aid to Pakistan in the last decade with actually absolutely no accountability. The asks, as you see on the screen, are to implement conditions on funding that are allocated from the US government and any other government, whether it's the UK government, Australian government, Canadian government, all these governments, Indian government, all these governments need to be forced to look at the funding that's going into Pakistan and how it's actually being used. That there should be an official human rights report commissioned every 6 months documenting the status, the socioeconomic, political, and sociocultural state of religious minority communities in Pakistan, that countries like India, US, UK, Canada, Australia, all these democratic countries that should be able to handle it should provide safe haven for these families that are being, suffering through forced conversion or kidnapping, marriage, religious persecution, and that we call on responsible organizations in the world to address this religious persecution and make it a priority not only for their organization, but for the world as a whole. In addition to this, so these are the asks from the federal government, but we are also presenting a lot of this at city council meetings and state meetings and organizing annual vigils. And we ask you all to be a part of those or to pay attention to what's going on. Now, I'll just end on what we ask from all of you. Become an advocate for these girls in your own homes, in your social circles, with your friends, in your cities, in your organizations. Help raise awareness in your social circles, on social media, in person. Pay attention to the stories. Now, as a Sindhi, my parents grew up in that region. They left after partition. I know I've talked to my parents a lot, and they don't like listening to these stories. They don't like paying attention to them, but I forced them to. I tell them about them each and every time, because what happens to a girl in Pakistan is happening to each of our daughters around the world. Personally, educate your local and state officials. And finally, and most importantly, not only volunteer your time, but volunteer your money to support causes like this that are helping these families and these girls get out of the living hell that they find themselves in each and every day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rakhi. Rakhi was the original one who lit the fire with Chingari, and we are taking the baton forward now. Thank you so much, Rakhi. And I'm going to invite quickly, I know we are running short on time. I would like to go ahead and ask upon Richa Gautam to talk quickly for 2 to 3 minutes. We actually partner with other organizations across the globe. Chingari has its own chapters in Germany and Australia, and we also partner with the organizations and other other parties like Care Global, War. So Richa has been working on this issue for a long time now as well, and she represents us on this issue in UN. And I would really like Richa, for next 2 or 3 minutes, if you can quickly share what your experience has been so far.
Thank you, Deepti ji. Namaste to everybody. And thank you so much for hosting this important conclave, which brings us all together, because all of us care about this issue and do our little bit, here and there on our own steam. But when we come together, that power just manifold, exponentially explodes and makes this an amplified voice. So thank you so much for this platform. I think I have shared with you a couple of refugee videos just to showcase, how these people suffer, not only in Pakistan, but when they come out of Pakistan, Pakistan being the kind of rogue nation that it is, wherever I have seen, whether as CARES Global is an alliance that works in India, it works in Africa, it works in US and in Canada to settle these refugees. And in Africa, it's a unique project that we have set up, because one of the things I found out was that there is so much suspicion that even though Uganda is a country that allows refugees to come in from various countries, it's one of the most popular destinations, but Pakistan was on the banned list, and we had to work really hard to get it off the banned list to showcase that there are these persecuted minorities of Hindu religion, Christians, Sikhs, who want to get out and build their lives again. So that has been one of our important projects. Couple of things that I have done personally, through support from others also, is represented this issue in the United Nations in March this year, in the 52nd session of the United Nations Human Rights Council. And of course, blasphemy is a big issue there, apostasy is a big issue, and of course, the girl-child issue is probably the most painful issue. And also in the European Parliament, Bangladesh being no different, we had seen in 2021, there was the persecution, rapes of women, breaking of temples, and killing of various Hindu people while they were celebrating their important festival of Durga Puja. And so we took this issue at the European Parliament as well to at least get it recorded and do a deposition there. I want to also point out, I'm sure everybody is aware that this mentality, which is rampant in Pakistan, has also seen with the emergence of the transmigrations, and the global terror networks, it has manifested itself in UK as the grooming gangs, as Ominder Ratnaji pointed out. The terminology needs to be our own vocabulary, not, euphemistically named, but at this moment, 809 Pakistani men were captured there who had groomed over 1 million girls over 40 years. 20,000 girls, little minor girls from schools are groomed. The playbook is the same across the world. And they are, raped, gang raped, and then, of course, their lives are destroyed. Recently, this issue has emerged in Toronto. Natasha Fateh, the daughter of the famous humanitarian activist Tariq Fatehji, has pointed this out and written an article about it, how rampant this issue is in Toronto. And I have personally received cases from Canada, from areas in other parts also. So it's at our shore. It's not that United States is going to be, that safe haven for us. We have to be aware. We have to bring this issue out in the open and talk about it without the hesitation, which UK has faced for so many years. To be, and I want to end with this thought that because this is a global issue, we really need to bring it up as a global issue, as a resolution, maybe in the United Nations, as as an important documented, information to the rapporteurs who look at child rights, at women's rights in the United Nations and in the European Parliament, and bring a common solution, because this is a globalized problem. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And if we can play the videos, Deeptiji, I think, but it's in the vernacular language, it's in the local languages.
Yeah, we will definitely share the links to your videos, Richaji, just because of the time. And finally, I'm gonna call upon our Hindu Pact president, founder and president of BHPA America, to come and talk on Hindu Pact, as well as make some closing remarks. Before I pass it on to Ajay, I just wanted to make one quick comment here that we have heard from all our panelists, all our speakers today. We can imagine that we are living in our own bubbles. We are living in privileged countries, privileged societies, where we cannot fathom something like this happening to children across the globe. But if we think about this specific country, Pakistan, just comparing it with the law-abiding countries and this lawless country, it's unimaginable what these little girls and their families go through every single day. With that, I'm going to pass it on to you, Ajay, and give us your last thoughts and closing comments, please, and vote of thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, and namaste. I don't know what I can say after listening to all the things that I've heard. There's a common thread when we talk about the Chingari project, and we talk about the little girls as young as 7 years and 9-year-old being abducted and being converted, forcibly married to men who are 45, 50 years old, and the Yazidi women who were captured by ISIS and then sold into slavery. We cannot imagine that in this day and age, we have women who are being sold on the streets as slaves. And we hear about the grooming gangs in the UK, and we hear about all the other things. And there's a common thread, and the thread is that there is, at least there's in certain societies, the women not just don't get equal status. I mean, they just are not valued at all, and they're being looked at as objects and worse, rather than equals. And when we live in a place like America, or when we live in a place like India, we look at women differently. And that, I mean, at least if we can all work collectively and bring these women who are really, treated in such a, such a poor manner, if we can at least rescue them by putting our collective pressure. We live in a country that has a lot of power, international power, and both in terms of hard power and soft power. And if we can exercise that power and help a 7-year-old girl, help a 9-year-old girl, 11-year-old girl, I think that would be our power well exercised. From Hindu Pact perspective, Hindu Pact is about 3 years old now, part of an organization that is over 50 years old. And I'll just give you in the next 2 minutes what we do overall. For all the people who are familiar with the Hindu Pact, this would be in some ways, you guys already know it, but for a lot of people don't know that we do activities that are broadly classified in three categories. One is the policy research, advocacy, human rights, and Hindu identity related issues. The other is our effort on Hindu vote. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, but we do have voter education, get out of the vote campaign, and such as part of our hinduvote.org website and Hindu Vote initiative. And we also encounter Hindu hate, both as a mass movement and academically. A little bit more detail on that. If I can go to the next slide. Here you go. Our span of work, as I mentioned earlier, we span all around, but I'm not going to read this entire slide, but you guys can see that we try to train our youth, we train the community advocates, we increase the awareness about Hindus, we collaborate with the mandirs or Hindu temples and other organizations, and we are the voice for human rights globally, and we mean human rights, and we come at it from the Hindu perspective, but we are talking about human rights, people of all religions, all races, all ethnicities, all genders, all of it. And if you look at some of our activities, we have been talking about
Actually,
Chingari.
do you want to make your slides bigger, like the other screen?
Oh, make it bigger?
You're sharing the other screen.
I'm sharing the other screen. Oh, I see. Okay, got it. You know what? I'll just make it easy. I'll just do this. How about this? And now
Sure.
you can see the slide better?
Yeah.
All right. So from the human rights perspective, as I mentioned earlier, we speak in terms of human rights from Hindu perspective. We also counter Hindu phobia academically and as a mass movement. We were the first actually to start the Hindu anti-defamation movement anywhere in the world under the banner of American Hindus Against Defamation. And for last 2.5 years, we have an academic study of Hindu phobia and awareness campaign under the banner of Hindu Dvesha, which means a systemic Hindu phobia. And we also have the voter education initiative called Hindu Vote. Finally, we do celebrate and increase awareness of the other things that we counter in this society. We have talked extensively about socially integrated social awareness, equality under the Ambedkar Jayanti or Omnitude Day, where we want to make sure that social injustices, equality, equity related issues are addressed. We have celebrated Black History Month in past. We recognize the American history and the traditionally the inequalities that have existed in America. We have also celebrated Pride Month because we want to make sure that no one, regardless of their what gender and their sexual preference, is being discriminated against in any way. And United Colors of Holi is a unique initiative which brings together people of all races, ethnicities, nationalities together to talk about what unites us, just as the Hindu festival of Holi brings all the colors together. And we have a periodic now. It used to be monthly, but it's now weekly. It's periodic show called Hindu Lounge. So with that, my final thought is this is from Bhagavad Gita. And it is really appropriate for this audience and the audience outside to keep this quote in mind. When we look at a really insurmountable issue like the persecution of girls in a country where we don't actually have a direct presence, what can we do? And Bhagavan Krishna said that we are kept from our goal, not by obstacles, but by a clear path to a lesser goal. So I think our goal has to be that wherever we encounter the persecution of these girls and women, whether it is in UK, whether it is in it's in India, whether it is in Pakistan, whether it's in Bangladesh, wherever it is, let's not think of it as, or right here at home in America, let's not think of it as something that is insurmountable. Let's say that this is, we are going to have a larger goal. We are going to work really hard towards it. We are going to counter it and we are going to overcome it. And if we can do that, I think hundreds of thousands of women and girls who are going through these kinds of persecutions around the world will, they will bless us, they'll thank us. And with that, thank you very much for all joining. And Deepti, thank you very much for putting all this together. I know there's a big team, and so, but everyone, Preeti ji, Seema ji, Nutan ji, Rakhi ji, you guys have all worked really, really hard through the year. to make this happen. So I cannot thank you guys enough.
Thank you so much. And I would really like to thank all our audience today, and please provide all your support. Chingari needs a lot of voice and a lot of grassroots level work that we aim to do. We will be conducting and organizing a few events throughout the year, like City Council readings, as well as our annual vigil, which will happen later this year. So we look forward to getting support from everyone across the globe. Thank you so much.
I wanted to thank the panelists especially for joining today. I don't know why I missed it, but couldn't have done it without all the panelists from around the world. So thank you very much. Okay.
I appreciate everyone. Thank you.